I want to welcome to the stage Kevin Terwilliger. He is the IoT Solutions Director at Dell. He leads vertical strategy and creation of use case blueprints. I think we've heard a lot of topics around blueprints this week. And he actually focuses on demonstrating ROI for many customers in the IoT space. And he's going to focus on smart manufacturing, connecting machines to significantly improve machine efficiency. Welcome to the stage.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if I need the stage, but I'll stand up here anyways. I didn't want to walk too close to Stephanie when she was up here. It gets a little awkward sometimes. I often, whenever I speak in Asia, I often start off with nGage is the biggest term that I learned in China, because that's the first thing people say to me is, how tall are you? Very tall, very tall. But anyways, I'm so excited to be here with you guys. It's a really exciting time, actually, in IoT and Dell Technologies. Before I jump into my slides, and I think you guys are pulling them up, or maybe I have control already. Perfect. We actually just came back from a big event that we put on up in New York City called IQT Day. I'm not sure how many people saw some of the news, but we announced quite a few updates to our strategy around IoT. One of which is Michael was actually up on stage and announced that we're going to be investing $1 billion of R&D funds into IoT over the next 3 years. The other big announcement was actually that we're forming a solution division, and that's going to be run by the CTO of VMware, Ray O'Farrell, and he's actually going to now have oversight over all of Dell Technologies for IoT, pulling together all these different business units. And we see that as just such a strategic move within our company, because now, we've been working from a piece parts perspective a little bit in different divisions, bringing up our IoT strategy. Now we have that one source of truth to bring those solutions together, as well as solution architects in that team that our customers can engage with and bring those pieces together. And we like to say that IoT deployments are edge core cloud, and that brings a lot of different parts of the architecture together. Now, with Ray O'Farrell's organization, you can engage with that one team that brings it all together. And so you'll be hearing more and more about that, but I wanted to share that exciting news. Came back from New York City last night at about 11 p.m., so got some caffeine in me and getting going. Today I'm going to talk a little bit more about edge computing. So I fit into our edge analytics, or our edge computing division, and I lead our solution marketing efforts, and I'll talk you through that a little bit more. But the first thing is, a lot of industry terms, right? IoT, machine-to-machine, cloud, data analytics, they all mean a lot of different things. There's a lot of different industry terms. There's a lot of overlap between these different things. But a lot of it comes down to being digitally enabled. And many of our customers want to talk to us about digital transformation, right? And the fact of the matter is, so IDC came out with this stat a couple years ago saying that 33% of industry leaders were going to be disrupted by 2018. 2018 is just around the corner now, so we can look back at this and say, well, how true is this? Well, you can think through many different industries, right? The automotive industry, transportation around taxis, hotel industry with Airbnb, Netflix coming in and disrupting. Many, many different industry leaders have been disrupted. And a lot of it comes down to these new entrants being digitally enabled. So then the question is, in your industry, who is that disruptor that's coming in? And how can you be the disruptor instead of being disrupted? In manufacturing, where we spend a lot of our time talking to customers is, here are some of the different industry dynamics. The first one on the list, and very common term, very common thing to hear in IoT presentations, is this idea of IT-OT convergence. And a lot of people just kind of throw that out there, and that's the end of it. But to be honest, we really are seeing this. Now, Dell, you see us as an IT company, right? A lot of people don't know that Dell actually is the underpinnings of many OT companies through our OEM division, which is a $3 billion division at Dell. They do business with 4,000 different customers. But many companies like Honeywell, Johnson Controls, Emerson, and some other ones that I'll talk about, OT companies are running on top of Dell. But we really are seeing these two divisions coming together in organizations. More and more, we're seeing IT having ownership in these OT-type activities. Because they need to be thinking more about manageability and security and some of that heritage that IT has. And then there's many other things that are really driving this. Just the need for overall agility, the need for greater partnerships. That's a lot of things that are driving this digital transformation in manufacturing. And when it comes to transforming, we tend to see that there is a maturity curve or a path to digital transformation. It tends to oftentimes start with operational efficiency. The reason why we see customers starting there with things like predictive maintenance and real-time quality control is because that's where the hard ROI is in IoT. And by starting there, you can see some of that ROI come in, and that enables you to fund some of these other initiatives where the ROI might be a little bit harder to quantify. Moving into things like customer experience. For a manufacturer, that's about giving visibility to data to some of their customers, improving supply chain, improving their agility again. Then moving into mitigating risks, and finally these net new revenue models. Connecting machines, selling things as a service. You've probably heard selling elevators as a service. How many people have heard the talk of that? People don't, companies don't want to sell the steel cage anymore. They want to sell the service of moving you between floors. And on top of that, they add in additional services like advertising in the elevator, selling air as a service instead of selling the compressor itself. Well, it takes some time to go get there, and that's why it's important to start with those operational efficiency gains. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I hate IoT presentations that are super fluffy and they just stay up here at the strategy level. So I'll give you some real examples of what we've been doing with our customers. And I mentioned the OEM division. Well, one of our biggest OEM customers is Emerson. Emerson had the challenge where they sell valves into refineries. And oftentimes, when it comes to actually going and analyzing what's happening with that valve, the operator actually has to walk into that refinery. Not a place you really want to spend a lot of time, to be honest. Hook a computer up to the PLC that's there and understand what's happening with the valve. Well, what Emerson wanted to do is basically move that into a service that they can offer to help customers move from being reactive to actually being predictive, using our edge gateway, connecting to that PLC locally. Now they trust that data to actually leave the refinery, and they can remotely monitor all those valves, keeping those operators out of those extreme conditions. So that's a solution that Emerson is now offering. Another great example is the Weir Group. So the Weir Group is about a 150-year-old industrial company. When we talk about industrial companies going to sleep and waking up being a digital company or really going through that transformation, we hear GE talk about that a lot. That's really what Weir's doing. They sell pumps, and one of their biggest industries is actually mining. These pumps that they go out into the field, they have a similar challenge as what Emerson was going through, where they want to make the most money in the margin of the service after point of sale. But the challenge is they're doing that on a regularly scheduled basis, and oftentimes putting a guy in a helicopter and sending him out to a mine to examine what's happening with the pump. And he gets there and he finds out one of two things. One, there's nothing wrong with the pump. We just wasted a ton of money to send this guy out there. Or there's something wrong with the pump and I don't have the part because there's no way I can bring every part with me to fix the pump every trip I take. So now, again, by connecting the unconnected, connecting up these pumps, processing that data there locally and understanding when an event is occurring, predicting when maintenance needs to happen, now they only send a guy out when he has to be there and he has the right part in hand. So that's what the Weir Group is doing. Part of the reason why they're doing business with Dell is because they actually have pumps in 80 different countries now. Again, they've been doing business for a long time. And so when it comes to supporting that across all of those different countries, they needed a partner with global scale that can enable them. And finally, ALPS manufacturing. So ALPS, in this case, they are a huge manufacturing company, but in this case, they were actually producing shift knobs for a premium automobile. High gloss black, and in this particular case, they were not allowed to do any rework on that shift knob. As you can imagine, you're touching that shift knob every day, many, many times, and so this automotive manufacturer is like, hey, we're not letting you rework it at all. It needs to be perfect. So they had a 20% scrap rate on those shift knobs. Very expensive, very bad for the environment. They were literally throwing these away. They couldn't rework them. So working with our partner Action Point, who's a system integrator, we went in and actually helped them instrument that whole process, doing edge analytics on top of it. And IoT is that intersection point in data. So what they were able to do is find out that the process, it wasn't the paint that was the issue. It wasn't particulate in the air. What they actually found was the issue was the operators, and the operators were going in and out of the paint booth multiple times throughout the day. That was changing the environment within the paint booth, and that was what was causing the high scrap rate. And they were able to reduce that down to 5%. Without doing that instrumentation, they never would have known what was causing it. So what's underpinning all of these different transformations that these companies are going through? So it's an edge fog cloud or edge core cloud architecture. The biggest difference here, and you've probably heard this many times and had conversations up here about the role of the cloud in IoT even this morning. In IoT, all of this data can't just be sent to the cloud. Traditionally in an IT application with the smartphones in our pockets and things like that, oftentimes the cloud was the repository. Everything was sent there. Most of our applications run in the cloud. But when you look at IoT and the 50 billion or whatever analyst is on the stage, whatever that number is, a lot of things, as it gets connected, you can't just backhaul all of that. And so this edge fog cloud, these layers of analytics are really important. And so we believe that the greatest advantage that Dell Technologies can bring is the fact that we have the industry's broadest infrastructure portfolio to help our customers put analytics where they need it for their specific use case. Because I can't stand up here and say it's all about edge or it's all about cloud. It really depends on the use case. Because if you're doing real-time quality control, you're analyzing video data and it's about split-second decisions. But if you're doing predictive maintenance, a lot of that can happen in the cloud because you're predicting 30 or 60 days out when an event is going to occur. The other thing that's really important, again, our IT heritage, is that security and manageability. Because you can't do this at scale without having the right strategy around securing and managing each of those layers of the architecture. And we like to say that this is really a partnership between the two, or if you can think about it as an athlete and a coach, right? It's the best analogy we can think of how the cloud and the edge work together. The cloud being the coach, the athlete being the edge. The athlete has to make a split-second decision when he's about to swing at a pitch or take the shot. He can't refer back to the coach to make that decision, but the coach is constantly educating that athlete, whether it's about the competitive environment or historical data about that athlete. He's updating that rules engine through the training that he's providing to that athlete. And over time, the athlete gets smarter and smarter. He's making better decisions. The coach isn't out of the picture. He's playing a critical role, but he's not making every single decision along the way. So that's why we think about those two. And then really the athlete is doing machine learning, and the cloud is doing deep learning, and that's that partnership. So the way we enable edge computing is through gateways and embedded PCs. This is a business that we jumped into about 2.5 years ago, taking all of our expertise around compute devices and rugged compute and bringing that to the edge, spanning all the way from really small, the Edge Gateway 3000 designed to go into situations like transportation, other mobile environments, spanning all the way up to the embedded box 5000 with a Core i processor. But keep in mind, all of this is designed for industrial environments, so it's all fanless, no spinning parts, extended life cycle, all the things that an industrial customer would expect for buying compute. And ultimately, this all enables a faster innovation loop, because you want to be able to make sense, make sense, and act faster and faster and faster, because then you can be more innovative. And that's why you want to have the right level of compute at the edge to sense and make sense faster. From a manufacturing perspective, we talk a lot about how this fits into existing architectures, because IoT isn't all greenfield. Man, it'd be so easy if it was all greenfield, but it's not. A lot of times we're fitting into existing architectures. So it's important that our customers understand where these edge computing devices fit into the existing control systems on the manufacturing floor. We're not coming in and saying that we're going to be doing real-time type decisions or safety systems, right? We're sitting on top of that and bridging the right data back into their management and their IT systems. And I'll talk a little bit more about Edge XFoundry and the role that it plays in bridging this data back. But before I do that, just to hit home this need for edge analytics, I've been talking a lot about it. It's actually been proven in nature for quite a while. And so you think about this idea of computing closer to the things. Well, it's not new to IoT. We're not the first to think of this. Actually, if you look at an octopus, 65% of its brain is actually outside of its head. It's out in its tentacles, closer to the suckers or the sensors, because otherwise it can't act fast enough to provide instruction back out to its tentacles, right? Its tentacles will all be stuck to each other, wouldn't know what to do when it interacts with things. And so edge analytics is actually proven in nature. So if you remember one thing from my presentation, remember the octopus proves edge analytics in nature. But to be honest, this whole idea of edge computing, it's not easy. There are a lot of challenges for edge computing. There's a reason why the cloud has been so popular, right? There's a reason why we've moved back and forth with this pendulum shifting from distributed computing with the PC era to back into this consolidation of that in the cloud. That happened because it's hard to do that at scale, right? It's hard to have compute distributed out. So what are we doing to solve for that? Well, there's a couple things. One is, a lot of times in IoT, computing needs to happen in dirty, dank, dangerous environments that most PCs go to die, to be honest, right? And so we need to engineer for that, engineer for things like moisture in the air or even oil in the air, engineering for high vibration situations, engineering for low connectivity, all these things that happen out in these extreme environments. The other big challenge is around the connectivity that's needed. And that's both physical connectivity and wireless connectivity. But then on top of that, there are thousands of protocols out there. And today, most IoT deployments are slowed down tremendously by the fact that just getting access to the data, it's easy to connect up the machine. But then you're looking at translating all these different protocols so you can actually get visibility into the data. And finally, the last thing is distributing computing at scale is not an easy thing to do. So having the right manageability and security, and I'll talk through that a little bit more in a second. So those are the three things that we've been focusing our time on to enable our customers to scale faster with edge computing. So the first one, this idea of these extreme environments. So we put our products through extreme testing. And although edge computing from a fixed perspective or a gateway and embedded PC, that's relatively new to Dell. We've launched that business 2.5 years ago. We've been doing rugged compute for about 12 years. So we've been doing rugged mobile products, tablets, and notebooks. And it's that same engineering team that has this expertise making IP65 tablets that go into the military, that go into police situations. Same engineering team engineering our products. And I'll just give you one of these as a quick example. On the top left corner, we talk about hot temperature. Again, dirty, dank, dangerous environments. A lot of times, these computing devices are actually being embedded into other things. They're being put into an enclosure or being integrated into a larger machine. So when we talk about hot temperature, we say that our products are rated from -30 to 70 degrees C. We actually mean that that's absolutely no moving air, right? And so again, you don't have a fan in the product. You're dissipating all that heat out. Any air that's moving in the environment is actually changing that test. So we have a chamber that's completely dead air to prove that at 100% utilization of the product over that 10-year life cycle, that it can withstand 70 degrees C. So when we put the Dell stamp on it, that's what we mean when it comes to testing these products. How many people have heard of XFoundries before? A couple people? Great. So this is an initiative that was really seeded out of our CTO office and our IoT team over the course of the last 2 years. And then we contributed a little over 100,000 lines of code into the Linux Foundation to launch XFoundries. The whole idea here is that there are a lot of platforms in IoT, and the challenge is oftentimes getting the data into the platform. All these different protocols, Profinet or BACnet or Modbus, or we can go on and on and on. Lots of different standards that are out there. Each driver is being written and rewritten and is slowing down the whole industry. So the idea behind XFoundries, instead of Dell coming out with the 101st platform and offering that to the market and creating more fragmentation, we decided it made a whole lot more sense to do this in an open way and enable the industry to work together so that when you write a driver once, it works for everyone. So To give you a great example of that, and my colleague can tell the story a whole lot better, the leader of our EdgeX initiative, Jason Shepard, but he talks about Schlumberger actually went and wrote a driver to connect some of their equipment back to the Google Cloud, and they contributed that in. And now anybody that needs to connect up through XFoundry to the Google Cloud can do that, right? Instead of having to rewrite it over and over and over again. So this was actually launched back at Hanover earlier this spring with 50 contributing members, actually the biggest project that Linux Foundation has ever launched. And I think now they're a little bit over 60, with Samsung being the latest to join that initiative. So a lot of big movement in the industry of trying to bring all these standards together and having an interoperability platform for the edge. And finally, this idea of distributing compute being challenging at scale. Well, we try and do this purpose-built for industrial, but with IT in mind all along the way, right? And we started off when we first built our business, we said, well, these edge gateways, they need to be OT on the outside and IT on the inside. Meaning on the outside, they need to be robust and industrial grade, but on the inside, if it's an IT pro, he can crack that thing open and it'll look just like any other desktop PC. He can trust that he can secure it because it has TPM integrated. He can trust that he can manage it, that he can control it at scale with things like our Edge Device Manager. So really IT on the inside. We've also made some other big changes into this business. It's quite unique from the rest of Dell. Things like extended product lifecycle of being able to buy it from Dell for 5 years of support beyond that. Things like, you're used to that tech support, that consistent supply chain. These things sound like it's table stakes, right, for Dell, that you would just say, Dell's been doing that for many years. It's not in the industrial industry, right? Many of our competitors don't offer that level of support, don't have that consistent supply chain, talking about 14 or 18-week lead times just to get products. So leveraging all of that heritage that we have as Dell actually gives us quite a leg up in this industry. We also do a lot around the regulatory environment as well, making sure that all these certifications are done and ready to go for partners like the Weir Group that want to scale to 80 countries and support all those pumps that they have out in their environment. They don't have to go through the process of doing all the regulatory certs to put products in those different countries. We've done that for them, and they can scale much faster. And finally, a big advantage that Dell can offer is through Dell Financial Services, all of our leasing and pay-as-you-grow type activities. IoT, oftentimes, our customers want to offer IoT to their customers as a service. Hard to do that if you have a big capital expense around the infrastructure. So we'll lease it or we'll finance it in a way that enables them to scale faster when they want to provide something as a service. So I'm coming to the end. I'll just talk about a few more customer examples really quick, and then I'll love to open it up for a couple of questions. Just hitting home 4 other quick examples of our customers. One is real-time quality control with our partner, Eigen Innovations. This is actually in an automotive manufacturing plant where they wanted to improve the quality of adhering the windshield to the car. Great example of a high need for edge computing. They took an infrared camera and they followed that bead of adhesive in real time, and they knew for sure that bead of adhesive wasn't outside of a certain variance, either causing a cosmetic concern or causing leakage after point of sale. And so that's what we did with Eigen Innovations for real-time quality control. A galvanization plant where they wanted to know how much material am I actually applying to every part when I'm galvanizing it. So by connecting their forklifts and connecting their cranes, they were able to know before and after when they dipped a part in the galvanizing in that vat, they know exactly how much material was applied to it, and they could optimize that. Predictive maintenance, we're working with many different leading machine builders who want to offer predictive maintenance as a service. I believe that we talk a lot about predictive maintenance in IoT. There aren't a lot of factories that want to consume predictive maintenance on their own, but there are a lot of OEMs that see tremendous value in offering that as a service to their customers. And then finally, working with our partner Relayer in a bottling plant over in EMEA, where they were able to connect up a few of their machines and be able to better identify where their bottlenecks are and increase production in that plant by a whole day. So every day they produce 1.2 million bottles. They were able to add that on, so they actually added a day of production worth of bottles by reducing those different bottlenecks. I'll close there and open it up for any questions. I think we have maybe 5 minutes left. Do you guys have mics that you'll hand around? Or? Great. Any questions? Stephanie, you tell me they're never quiet.
We've been pretty active.
There we go. One guinea pig.
Right, thank you for the nice presentation. A lot of things. I think try to see what do you see in terms of all these technologies, industry, on-prem and the cloud. What kind of thing or hybrid, from their perspective? How, as a user or the partners, how do we leverage technologies? How do we, from deployment perspective, how do we, kind of maximize both sides and have the hybrid mode?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the use case, but that hybrid model is really important because our customers oftentimes want to put a edge core cloud infrastructure in place and then balance the analytics across that as needed. But I'll give you an example. We're working with a customer up in Newark. We just got to go visit them actually when we were up there, called Aero Farms, and they have an aerial farm. And for them, they're already doing quite a bit around the environment of the farm. It's an indoor farm, and it's one of the coolest things you'll ever see. But once they started to put that infrastructure in place, they started to realize that there are 10 other use cases that they actually want to do in IoT. So once they get that infrastructure there and they have the headroom, they can put applications where they need it. And some of it will reside more so in the cloud for longer-term decision-making or deep learning. But then there's a lot of things like real-time quality control. They're doing something called multispectral imaging on the actual grow trays. That's going to happen right there next to the camera because it's very heavy data that they want to process immediately. So my recommendation is pick a partner that has that edge core cloud that gives you the flexibility to distribute analytics where you need it. All right.
So I think we've heard a lot over the past 2.5 days around edge. And I saw that you popped in edge, fog, cloud. Can you maybe give us a little bit more of your perspective on fog and its role? Because that kind of sits right in between the two needs.
Yeah, I mean, there's tremendous benefits on both sides of that continuum, right? The real-time decision-making, like we've been saying, around the edge. But the fact that you have more data continuity, your IT systems often reside in the cloud, the fog bridges that gap, right? It brings some of the benefits of the cloud, brings some of those capabilities like with deep learning and machine learning that are just more economically feasible in the cloud. We're starting to see that actually come closer down to the things because customers don't want to move that data, whether it's for security reasons, whether it's for latency reasons. They don't want to push all that data back to the cloud. So the fog can be a lot of things. The fog could be a mini data center at the base of a tower, or it could also be a data center in a closet on a manufacturing floor. There's a lot of things that blur that line, but we're seeing that as a really big growing space. And also from a Dell perspective, we're pretty good at that, right? We're pretty good at storage and enterprise compute. And as these use cases demand that level of machine learning, we see a big need for that in the industry.
Do you allow third-party companies to basically embed their platform software on your gateways? So if they want to use your gateway, but not necessarily maybe the rest of your infrastructure, they would be able to use that to aggregate data.
Absolutely, that's a great question, and I'm so glad you asked that, because one thing I didn't talk as much about is the role of our partners in all of this, right? Dell is an infrastructure provider, and we rely really heavily on all of our partners. In fact, DellIoTPartners.com, we have a partner program that's been awarded as industry leading multiple times now. We have close to 80 partners there. And many of them are doing just that. They have a platform, they have expertise in a specific part of that compute stack. They'll qualify that on top of our edge gateway, or in Edge Core Cloud, we give them the flexibility of using the pieces that they want, and then they'll go to market. They love it too, because a lot of times they are more on that OT side. So when they walk into a customer and IT is sitting at the table, IT is like, well, who the heck are you? And they say, well, I'm doing this on top of Dell, right? Here there's a trusted brand behind me, and they get a lot of value out of that. But oftentimes, that's a very common engagement with our partners. Yeah.
Thank you. Just thinking about that Octopus and also the edge computing, and it seems like all the IoT is involved with some kinds of processing of graphics and also analytics. Are you thinking to implement any kind of graphical processing on those edge computing units?
Yeah, that's a big need for sure, especially as you move into things like real-time quality control where you have a lot of graphical processing. That's an area that we're exploring more. We actually, in our Edge Gateway 5000, one of the products that I showed, we have an expansion module on that. Basically enables you to put additional graphics processing there. And so that's something that we've enabled. And we're also, as we look to the future, offering more and more modularity around those products for things just like that. And on the server side, we actually just announced through the Dell Technologies Capital Group a big investment with GraphCore as well, doing a very similar thing. So we see that bridging between edge and also in that fog core layer. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.